Okay, so hi everyone. Today we're going to be going over a couple of different things, but let's start off with announcements. So one of the things is that we're doing a hike this weekend. So related to that, I actually wanted to let everyone know that there's a couple different things to look at. One is um, we do have, if you go over to Discord, we do have a when you free to just check what everyone's availability is like. So if you go over to that right now, we have seems like we have more availability for Saturday, but please, if you are able to join us, do put in what availability works best for you so that we can finalize that. As for where we're going right now, based on again the poll that we have up on general, it does seem like we have Santa Teresa Coyote Peak as our lead candidate. Um, but if you want to vote for one of these other options, then yeah, please just make sure that you vote in general. I know that everyone's been, busy with class and all of that, which is why we've also had to kind of play around with the scheduling for this hike more than we would have liked, but we are hoping to go. So if you can join us, we would love to have you. So that's the hike that we're going to have this weekend. Another thing I wanted to let people know about was that we really want to have people join us as officers going forward. If you have been a part of any of the projects or you're just really interested in helping us do what we prepare for meetings, handle a lot of the logistics, we'd really like to have people join us as an officer. And we're naturally, we have some people who are not going to be with us after this semester because they're graduating. Shout out to them, Gaston being one of them. But because of that, we also want to make sure that we have enough of an officer corps who is still with us going forward. So yeah, if you're interested in that, please ask me any questions you have, and yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And same goes to any of the officers. You can reach out on Discord, or you can just ask me when we get a chance to talk one-on-one with some of you. And then lastly, I wanted to update you guys about the workstation, which has kind of been something that we've been focusing on trying to acquire. We actually purchased it a couple weeks back, and I'm happy to say we were actually able to we actually did get the workstation. So we're currently trying to figure out exactly where we're going to place it. So we're probably going to have it with advisor initially, Fabio, but we might then find a different home for it. But yeah, these are some of the specs if that's something you're interested in. And yeah, this is definitely an exciting development. We hope to eventually get this connected soon so that the club can actually start using it for some of their different projects. Oftentimes things like using Google Colab or other compute resources can be a little tricky. So hopefully if we can get this set up and have a model where you can log on and do time sharing and things like that, you'll be able to train your models a lot quicker and hopefully tackle even more exciting projects than the ones we're dealing with currently. So that was something that I wanted to share. This is also a picture of the actual workstation. This was something that happened recently, so yeah, I want to share that. And yeah, I think with that, we can just dive into some of the interview questions we'll go over today. So yeah, let's head over to that. So yeah, we've been covering some of these interview questions the last couple general meetings. Hey.
Yeah, I just had a doubt. When is the hike again? Is it on Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah, so what we wanted to see is what people's availability was like. So if you go to general, you'll see that we have a when free. This is basically just to help us understand what time works best for everyone. I think based on what we're looking at right now, at least currently, it seems like Saturday seems to be more popular. But again, if you are more available on Sunday, please indicate that in your availability. It looks like morning is most likely at this point.
Sure.
But that's what we're looking at right now. Yeah. I should pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions about the hike or anything else I mentioned so far? Okay, cool. If you do, please feel free to interject. I don't want it to just be a one-way thing. So yeah, we've been going over some of these interview questions over the last couple general meetings. So yeah, we had kind of gone through some of the class ML questions here and some of the natural language processing questions as well. But I wanted to focus to some of the computer vision and reinforcement learning questions. And really the purpose of this is, this is a more relaxed environment in which we can, kind of simulate trying to approach this kind of question and see what we know about these topics, right? And sometimes it's useful both in cases where you're trying to review something and also maybe just something you're not as aware of, but maybe it's something you can look into further, right? So kind of related to that, when you think of computer vision, right, there's many different applications, but we've kind of tried to choose some questions which are not too specific so that you have a chance of learning about them more and things like that. So the first question I'd like to ask is, what do you think the purpose of grayscaling is when thinking about computer vision? And anyone can answer. It's really just a chance for us to kind of brainstorm these questions together. Does anybody here have some experience with computer vision? Would maybe like to lead us off?
Hey, An, you sound a little staticky, but I can give it a shot.
Yeah, go for it.
So, if I remember correctly, the main use case is like to simplify the task you're working on, because normally you have like the RGB channels, but if it's grayscale, there's only one channel to worry about. So it can simplify the task, because not every computer vision task requires color.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, so yeah, does anybody else have any more thoughts about like why that would be useful from maybe like a computational perspective?
You're like pre-processing it to prepare to pass it into your convolutional neural net with the first layer can read it. So one of the pre-processing steps you might do.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. I think, yeah, kind of related to that, it does help you with reducing your dimensionality a little bit, right? Going from oftentimes you'll have RGB values, right? So you're kind of dealing with 3 different values there, and you're kind of mapping it onto just one value from, just in terms of grayscale. I think one other aspect is like if you think of something like OCR, right? If you're trying to do, think of the classic example of like MNIST, right? Where you're looking at doing digit classification from 0 to 9. Oftentimes those already are in grayscale, but if for some reason they weren't, right? If you were trying to do digit classification of any sort of digits, then maybe the first step you would do is apply grayscaling and then kind of proceed to your next step. So yeah, one of the main advantages there is really just being able to take out one of those variables that might be there and really reduce your dimensionality a little bit. Yeah, and thank you for sharing, guys. So yeah, another question I have is what are some object localization techniques? And just to help with leading the question a little bit, so object localization, a way to think about this is like how would you try to figure out where objects are within an image, right? And oftentimes, what is a technique you will use to do that?
Maybe one of them is to have like a window that runs through all the like small, like just like a crop of the image, and then run like a prediction to whether there is like an object present in that like window frame.
Yeah, great answer. That's exactly like one of the techniques you'd use, right? So yeah, what you're kind of referring to there is like using anchor boxes or bounded boxes, right? Where you're like trying to figure out, okay, is there an object here? And if there is, then you're kind of trying to frame it, right? As you're mentioning, by quite literally having a bounded box where you identify, okay, this is an object, and yeah, does anybody else have like any thoughts of why that is something that would be useful in a computer vision task?
The technique or object localization in general?
Either, if you want to speak to either.
Well, I guess object localization is useful because there's usually multiple objects and you wanna, might as well, for very low added cost, be able to identify every object of interest. And if you draw a box around them, not only is it good for identification, but it's used to kind of like separate areas of interest too. It's like kind of similar to the Canny algorithm, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that one of the aspects is right, like as you mentioned, like there can be multiple instances of any of those objects, right? And so, especially if you think about a case where perhaps you have even overlapping objects, right? That's also when having these bounding boxes becomes very useful, because then you can, that's a really important step before you get to kind of the classification or identification that part, which is you're first just identifying there's an object there, right? And then you can get to that next step of finding out trying to identify what exactly that object is. And so just very quickly, like I wanted to kind of look at just some basic examples just to like help put a visual on this. So, it's really just that idea. It's a little faint here, but they're putting some bounding boxes on these puppies here, and really localization is really just this bounding box part, but it's often used as a step in the overall task of computer vision, which is you're trying to often first do that localization step and then you go to that detection step, right? And there are various different approaches that you can use to achieve this. So it kind of goes into it a little bit further in terms of like using different convolutional neural networks. There's some specialized ones that you can use, but it really does go back to that initial idea of like first you just try to find that ground truth and then you're actually doing that identification stuff. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah, okay. We've kind of alluded to it a couple of times already, but why are convolutional neural networks actually often used in computer vision tasks?
From what I know, I think CNNs are used because they sort of represent like relational or just relationship between different features. So for images, you have like, you go from very low level features. So if you're trying to detect a face, you go from like detecting like the space between the eyes, and then it keeps building up to like detecting eyes, nose positions, and then recognizing that it's a face. So that's helpful in for tasks related to vision.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing, Shiloh. That's a great answer. Yeah, actually, that is kind of one of the advantages that you have these multiple different layers often within the convolutional neural network, and as you're suggesting there, some of the initial layers, they kind of look at some smaller things like detecting edges or certain kind of smaller aspects, but then as you get into deeper and deeper layers, it actually starts being able to extract kind of bigger patterns and even things like full-on objects when you get into the deepest layers. Another aspect is, when you're dealing with a lot of large image data sets, that's often has a huge dimensionality, right? So what convolutional neural networks are able to do is they can actually help you reduce that dimensionality sometimes by actually mapping it onto a smaller feature space in terms of doing that transformation. Because really, the convolutional operations we're talking about has to do with different linear algebra manipulations that you're doing to do that reduction. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So yeah, what is padding and why do you often use it before applying convolutional operations? I guess one thing I'll mention there is like, so just to make sure that that part is clear, like, so in this case, this is referring to the idea of like, oftentimes, if you're having a image, right, an image will be made up of pixels with different, pixel values, be that RGB values, or in the case of grayscale, maybe you have something as simple as 0 or 1. But you will often apply a padding to the edges of the image. Why do you think this could be useful in the case of computer vision tasks?
To help keep the pixels of interest to be in the center, which is useful, but I don't remember how it's useful.
No, yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right? So that's the main purpose, right? So if you think about it, right, like if you had an object at the edge, near the edge of one of your images, oftentimes the type of filter you're using to actually do the convolutional operation, it kind of focuses more on the middle of the picture. So by adding that padding, you'll be able to actually focus even on the edges of that original image. And that's why you're often using that padding, to be able to make sure that you're even able to detect objects that are all the way at the edge of the image. Another aspect also has to do with sometimes you might be trying to do a manipulation where you might want to preserve the original image size while also still being able to detect objects on the image. So depending on that, you might actually increase your padding from this being like a 1 pixel padding to maybe even more, depending on what kind of filter you're using. Yeah, that's exactly it. So thanks for sharing. And then finally, what do you think an advantage of using transfer learning in computer vision is? And of course, transfer learning is used in other areas as well, but why do you think it might be specifically useful in computer vision?
I think that so sometimes we want to perform a very specific task that we don't have a lot of like, image data for. So we use like a pre-trained model for something else that's closely related, and with like the small amount of data we have, we can like continue training the model. We freeze the trained model and then just make it tailored specifically for our specific task.
Yeah, exactly. That's really it, right? Like you're trying to a lot of times, training a model, especially if you have a small data set, can be pretty difficult. So instead, if you apply some of those pre-trained models, not only does that save you a lot of that headache, but yeah, you're also actually often able to do that a lot quicker, both computationally and in terms of training time. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so that's kind of some of the computer vision questions I wanted to go over. I didn't really want to get into like the specifics of some of the libraries because I want these to be questions that are also useful just in general if you're trying to get into learn more about these topics. Of course, you might take classes and learn more about these as well. But this is kind of like a jumping off point. And now let's go to some of our reinforcement learning questions. So this one is a little more broad, but when you think of different areas of machine learning, how do you say reinforcement learning compares with supervised and unsupervised learning? And you can answer comparison with either one if it's just any thoughts you might have, or you can just define reinforcement learning.
I would say it's pretty different, given that you're more concerned with like a continuously updating state than like a standalone input.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the aspects, right? Like in reinforcement learning, I think a good example to think about is really that state paradigm that you're talking about, right? So imagine you're trying to get a robot to navigate in space, but you don't give it the instructions right from the beginning. You might give it a target, right? Okay, like you're trying to get to this place, maybe, but you don't actually tell it what to do necessarily at every single step explicitly. It kind of learns through trial and error. And that's really the key of a lot of reinforcement learning is this idea that you're trying to have the model learn through its interaction with its environment. So the differences between reinforcement learning and say supervised learning are that you in supervised learning, of course, right? You have the labels for what the correct answer is. In reinforcement learning, you don't do that, right? You're telling it that it needs to get somewhere, but you're not, telling it this is the exact path to do it. And so that's kind of the main difference you'll see with supervised learning. As for unsupervised learning, the main difference is that you're really trying to you know, like you're trying to maximize your reward. So like when you're trying to get to like goal state, your goal is to get there and get as much of a reward as possible going there. Whereas in supervised learning, you're really trying to learn more about data points, and you know, often classify them or do something like that. So those are actually very different tasks. So kind of some of the things you've mentioned, state, environment, maybe like a goal state, those things. It's kind of leading into our next question, which is what are the typical elements of the reinforcement problem?
If I remember, you don't really have like a deterministic goal. You're just trying to like reward it with points. So you just have like the state of the environment, things it can do, and then some type of feedback system that yields like points for whether the action was good or not.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And actually, yeah, I should clarify. Goal state is probably the wrong way to put it. It's really more about using the way in which you write your reward function to kind of help define what is the outcome you're looking for that model. So to kind of more directly address this question, one aspect is the environment, right? So this is the world in which whatever our agent is operates. Then you have the state, which is just the current state or situation of that agent in the environment. And the reward is often some function you define, but it really has to do with what is the feedback it's getting from its environment. So you can imagine, right? Like if your robot is trying to navigate and pick up some object in the real world, right? You want it to be able to detect the object, and you want it to then start trying to find a path towards it, and maybe you have reward related to the distance it is away from the object, right? As some sort of reward policy. So if it starts moving closer to the object, then that accrues a positive reward, whereas if it moves away from that object, then it accrues a negative reward, right? And then finally, the last element is policy. So this has to do with the idea of there does need to be some method that is being used for the agent to go from its initial state to taking an action. So really, the policy has to do with what that actual method is. So maybe that policy would be completely random, and as you can imagine, that would probably not lead to a good result if you're trying to achieve something specific. But there are different policies that you can use in different use cases. And so, kind of related to that policy thing and what Gaston was mentioning about deterministic. What do you think that the difference between a deterministic and stochastic policy is? And if you don't have experience with the policy aspect, if you can just draw upon the deterministic, like the difference between what is something being deterministic and stochastic?
The stochastic policy updates as the model like progresses, I guess. And then if it's deterministic, it's sort of statically defined by people.
Yeah, exactly. That's really the main difference there, right? And in a deterministic environment, like you in a deterministic policy, you're exactly defining, right, as you mentioned, what is going to happen. Whereas in a stochastic environment, you have more of a probability distribution, right, of what can happen. And let me just share an example to kind of make that a little more clear. So if we look at example here. Yeah, so basically, let's say you are in a current state, and in a deterministic policy, maybe it would just be the outcome that you get would, based on your policy, would be, okay, the only direction you should go in is down, right? Whereas in a stochastic policy, you get that probability distribution over the action space. So instead of directly saying that you should go down, maybe you get a policy like, okay, these are like the probability distribution of like what the agent should do. And then you can define how you actually choose the policy. In this case, the agent will probably still do the same action, but the way in which the policy is making that determination will be a bit different. Okay, and finally, what are some, can you think of any examples between an episodic and non-episodic reinforcement learning environment? And I'll make the same stipulation. If you can't necessarily think of that in the context of reinforcement learning, what do you think that might mean when thinking about, right, environments, states, some of the things that we've been discussing? Okay, let me, it might be trickier. So, you know, just think about it like in the case of TV shows. I think this would be a very helpful framing device, right? So when people talk about an episodic series, right, that often refers to where, you know, the action that is currently taken doesn't actually affect future actions, right? So basically, you can think about it as, I'm trying to think of an actual TV show example here, but I'm drawing a blank. But they're kind of all self-contained, right, in an episode, in an episodic series. Whereas if it's non-episodic, that's really a sequential environment, right? So that's where every single action that you're taking affects future actions, right? So, you know, an example to think about this is if we're going back to the example of the robot navigating towards an object in its environment, right, to pick up, any of the actions that it's taking will affect its future actions. Sorry, no, actually that would rather be an example where that doesn't happen, right? So you could, it would affect how long it would take to eventually get to that goal, but it could take any action after that, and it wouldn't really make a difference. But for example, in the case of a chess game, right, depending on any move you make at any given state, that does have a direct consequence on what happens later in the chess match. So that would be an example of a non-episodic environment. I hope that was somewhat clear for you guys. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you know, we'll probably go over some more interview questions in the future, but really the purpose of this was just to help just get an idea of what some basic interview questions might look like. These are more general than what you might experience in an actual interview, but we did want to kind of help brainstorm how you might want to approach these questions and really just have an experience where like you can answer these in a less stressful setting than if you're actually doing a phone interview or something. So yeah, with that said, I actually would now like to kind of focus on just taking a second to look back at the semester. So I know that we have a couple different people here, and I wanted to just take a second to check in with people about like how they felt the semester with the club had gone for them. I know that we have people of at varying levels of being with us, but even then, I just wanted to check in with people and see how the semester had gone, get any feedback if I have, things like that. So maybe to start off, I'll start with Shayla. I know you joined us. You were there with us at one of the first meetings I remember, but you joined the project groups a little bit later. But how you found your experience? Is there any feedback you have? I just wanted to check with people individually.
Hi, sorry, I have like a little hiccup right now, so
Oh, no worries.
but
no
yeah.
worries.
But I think one of the things I think that like made me kind of late to join the projects group was that I didn't like have time to join in on the meetings, and I'm always like a bit lost on what's going on with the progress and how things are. So I think it would be nice to have some sort of a summary, just typed out like review of what happened at the meeting. Maybe that will get more people to join in and start the project, because I was also a little bit overwhelmed with that, like the time kept passing by, and I was not like joining any group. So yeah.
No, yeah,
Sure,
thank you.
that makes
That's a great point. Sometimes we do want to give groups that flexibility of finding out processes work best for them. But you're right. Like I can understand your perspective of being worried about passage of time and where projects are exactly. And as you mentioned, like if you can't make meetings sometimes, of course, like due to classes or other things, that can make that feel even more difficult. So yeah, no, thank you for your feedback. I think that's helpful.
Are you referring to like project meetings or just like this overall one that we had on like Friday, or both?
You're asking Sheila, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry if that wasn't apparent.
yeah, I think sometimes project meetings, because you the comments you or the posts you mentioned, like you're gonna discuss the project progress, and like I think that part kind of made me hesitate to join in, because I'm not like doing any projects with you.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not in any project group yet.
Right. That's fair. I guess what I'd say is yeah, we do want to make sure that there's something in each meeting that is useful even for people who aren't currently in project groups. It just so happens to be like that is kind of one of the main focuses of the club, right? That we do want people to get that chance to work with other people on projects. So that's also why we often structure that we do the project updates at the end, right? So that way people can join us for the initial part, hear what the club is doing. We do some sort of shared session, and then we go to the project part. But yeah, we definitely don't want it to be the case that you feel that it's like something where you're on the spot or anything. So yeah, I think, the purpose of project updates is also to kind of allow not just, the officers, but other projects to know what people are doing. And oftentimes when you're thinking about the steps that you take in any sort of machine learning project, some of the roadblocks you run into might be similar. Not always, but whether it's an issue with figuring out what kind of pre-processing steps you might do, or maybe just trying to deploy a model. Those are things that even if another group isn't going to that directly at the moment, we do think that that's something that is sometimes useful for people to hear about, because if they experience something somewhere down the road, that can help them, just at least have some awareness, like, oh, this is something that another group did. Maybe that could be useful in my case. But yeah, with that being said, like, no, thank you for your feedback. That's definitely helpful. And yeah, Adam, I know that you haven't been able to join us every meeting, but I know you were also here a little bit last semester as well. Would you say what it was really the timing of the meetings, or was it
Yeah,
something
I
else?
really enjoyed going to the meetings and all the informational sessions we've had at each meeting. Yeah, I just say I got pretty busy this semester with my classes and like searching for a job, so I didn't really have the time I had in the fall semester to also dedicate it to a project.
No, yeah, that makes sense. It can be difficult with everything with classes, and as you're saying, and especially if you're looking for gainful employment, can be difficult to also do a project on top of that.
Yeah,
And,
and,
no, yeah,
and also, yeah, so I was pretty involved with the project Object Nav in the fall, and I
yeah,
still
that's true.
would like to continue, but Vlad was kind of leading it, and he got a little bit too busy to work on it as well.
That's true. That did happen. And yeah, so that's a great point. I think sometimes it can be difficult to find the time, and yeah, it's even true for Vlad, as he got busy with some of his senior project stuff. So yeah, no, that's totally fair. And that's something that we're also trying to think of, whether we can incorporate something that's like something that somebody can do that isn't as maybe involved as a project, that could still engage them. So some of the things we're still thinking about internally is like whether we encourage people to maybe like create some sort of like simple blog post on a specific topic that they're interested in. Maybe like creating a Google Colab workbook, something like that, like something that doesn't feel as a project is of course extremely useful when you think about like getting hands-on experience with things, or exploring just all the aspects of a machine learning task, and the kind of the stages you go through. But if you've already done that before, or if you just realize that you don't have time for it, we definitely would love to try to think of ways in which you can still feel involved in something that's long term, but not have like that worry about how long you would have to put into it each week.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'd say honestly with it in the masters AI classes, a lot of them have pretty involved projects. So
Yeah,
I personally feel like I'm getting like a lot of project experiences from the classes alone.
no, that's a great point. Yeah, true. Okay, and
It's great to I like going to the club because it's great to get to know other like-minded people at San Jose State.
yeah, of course. But yeah, thanks for sharing. Uh, and yeah, I guess maybe yeah, I'll I'll give a little bit of a review for myself, and then maybe Gas, you can also chime in. I'd say from my end, I think it was, even though we're not in person this week, I think last semester and this semester we've at least been able to have more hybrid meetings, which I think has been nice. I have been happy to have not just the projects, and I think it was nice that we had some groups working on Kaggle this semester. I think that's always a good experience to get, especially when thinking about what a lot of employers look at. But aside from even that, I think one thing I really enjoyed was getting to do, though we had to do like a ton of them, getting to do some of the social aspects was also fun. I enjoyed the hike we did like in March, and hopefully we'll be able to do this one tomorrow or Sunday, depending on people's availability. But I definitely have enjoyed that as well. And yeah, I do hope that it's been used with others as well. Yeah, Gaston, how would you say this semester went for you?
I was pretty absent, partially due to like time commitments, like you mentioned, the master's program in AI. I'm not in the AI one, but I just, it's my final semester, so I had a bit more work to do than I would have liked, and also the unfortunate fact that I have a class that starts at the halfway point of the meeting, basically like 12 to 3, so that kind of killed any chance of going in person, which is a little bit of a bummer. The thing I thought was the best was the hybrid approach, where there's like an option to do both, because a lot of the clubs I've seen it, they give you, they either commit to only one, or they do like 2 meetings, where if you go in person, it's really cool, and if you do like online, it's like kind of cool, but not as good. It's like more of a consolation prize. So I think
Yeah.
we did a good job with the hybrid thing, but I do agree with Shayla's criticism of kind of having a very opaque view of what's going on with the project. So I made a note of it, and hopefully we can fix that. I
Yeah,
think I want to go on the hike hopefully tomorrow and not Sunday, just because it's a better time slot. And
yeah. I think that's leading so far. I don't think we have any people who are strongly in favor of
Yeah.
Sunday, so I think it'll be tomorrow. So that should be fun. And yeah, no, I think it's a good points that the people have brought up.
yeah.
I think the thing with the projects, yeah, maybe we could do a thing where like we give a couple like updates in general or something, like when maybe we have the officers discuss with some of the project leads, and then we can get some like short updates from each of the projects, so that way people who haven't joined projects, they also have some idea of what's going on. It can be tricky though, like just to give you guys some idea, right? Like I think we've had one group who unfortunately has not really been able to join us most of the meetings, even though I know that they've been working here and there. Then another group, like kind of got started a little bit later. I think they really started like a couple weeks back with actually doing their EDA. But one of our groups definitely did get started earlier, and I think they have a longer term view of their project. So that's the group that's been doing some of the let me just here. Yeah, that's the group that's been doing the analysis of different dating apps. And yeah, so they've been I think doing it for a little bit. They're looking at it in many different directions. So they've kind of been scoping out some of the existing dating apps and looking at some of the literature of how they do both the matching. They're starting to look into the matching aspect. Initially, they were looking at just some of the sentiment about like what works and doesn't work for people on these different apps. So I think that's probably been our most involved project so this semester. But as I mentioned, like just the differences you see within how much time people have been able to devote those projects is probably why even like from the officer perspective, sometimes it's been a little bit difficult to get that, you know, status of like where each of the projects are. But yeah, it's definitely something that we can try to discuss with projects going forward about how we can ensure that, you know, they don't feel like they're you know, on the spot or anything, but also make sure that people who might be on the fence can get those updates. And then anyways, it is always a good thing to let people know what's going on in the book. So yeah, thank you everyone for giving that feedback. That's definitely helpful. And yeah, I guess our last thing would have been project updates, but I'm not sure that we have any project members here aside maybe from Shayla. I don't know if Shayla is involved with the
Yeah, I can talk about our progress.
okay, yeah, just if anything informally, it doesn't need to be.
Okay, yeah. So I think the last update was that we clean our data set, our Twitter data set, and we converted them to 3 different like model vectors or embeddings, representations. One is bag of words and TF-IDF and word to vec models. And so for the past week, we worked on training 4 different models. We did the Gaussian naive Bayes, the linear SVM, kernel SVM, and XGBoost on all 3 embeddings. And we have the runtime and accuracy F1 scores recorded. Currently, we are trying to get better results with part of speech tagging instead of using lemmatization, because we had some problems with lemmatizing words, so it's not doing too great. So we're exploring the parts of speech tagging. Yeah, that's all the updates.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Yeah, no, the lemmatization can be tricky sometimes. Because especially I remember like when you guys were showing your EDA, some of the tweets are pretty interesting, especially when you look at the like the bag of words or things like that. Like some of the words kind of make no sense. So yeah, no, I think that's definitely a good thing to explore if you can get better results by doing the parts of speech tagging initially and see how that affects your different models. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Shayla. Okay, and yeah, with that, I would just encourage people to fill out the when you're free and hopefully join us for the hike if they can. It looks like at the moment it'll probably be tomorrow morning. We'll probably meet around like 8:30 at the student union, and then go from there. You can also just meet us directly at the hike spot, which I believe will be Santa Teresa Baby Peak based on the current voting. But yeah, I think that's everything for this week's meeting. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you.